Good morning, everyone. It is Saturday, April 29th, 9:45-ish a.m. here on the East Coast. Thank you for joining us for our 19th The Ed Collab gathering. Jessica Walsh from our tech team leader, and I were just talking this morning. We can't believe that we've gotten to 19. Thank you for those of you that have been joining us since the beginning, or perhaps some of you that are joining for the first time today. The Ed Collab gathering is the Educator Collaborative's free gift to the education community around the world. Our day is a day made by educators for educators to support all of you in the work that you do with your students and with your colleagues in our amazing profession. So I am Chris Layman. I'm the founding director of the Educator Collaborative, and I'm going to start out talking you through, whether you are new or just joining us for the first time, a few things to know about navigating our day. Then I'll have a couple of opening remarks, and then I will introduce our incredible keynote for this morning. So whether it's your first time or your 19th time that you've been with us, hi, hello. The Educator Collaborative's gathering has always been a totally online, totally free, no registration conference. We want to make sure that everyone who wants access has access. And so there are multiple ways that you can navigate, including a few that are, or one that is new this year. So a couple of ways to navigate. Number one, some of you are joining. In fact, I see you literally from all over the world. Hi, US, Canada, Qatar, United Kingdom, Netherlands, Mexico, South Korea, Thailand, Jordan, China, France, and the list goes on. Hi from all over the world. Some of you are on our website right now, gathering.theeducatorcollaborative.com. That's the best place to see the full agenda, to know the schedule for today, to know all of the workshops and bios of our presenters, as well as other information too. That's the best place to go. So if you're on our website, a few ways that you can navigate today's gathering. You can use the drop-down menus. If you hover over workshops and then hover over session 1, 2, 3, or 4, you'll see all of the workshops pop out. So that's one place that you can go. You also, from that top menu, can find the opening and closing keynotes. You can also go directly on the agenda page. So when you go to gathering.theeducatorcollaborative.com, right there on the page, if you scroll down, is our full agenda for the day. You'll see next to every session that there are two links. One is watch here, the other is watch on YouTube. Watch here just takes you right to the page on our event website. Watch on YouTube will usually open up a new tab and you'll go straight to the YouTube video. To provide even greater access this year, something that we wanted to support all of you with is making sure that we curate our YouTube playlist really well. So I actually right now, it feels exciting for me. Maybe this is too nerdy, but I right now have my TV on. I can see it, and I have my smart TV is Apple TV. So I have my Apple TV on to the Ed Collab's YouTube page, and I'm watching myself right now. Hi, Chris. So if you are on the go anywhere, or if you rather not sit in front of a device, some of you are tuning in right now from our YouTube page. You can watch on any smart device, Roku, Apple TV, Samsung TV, list goes on, or you can go online to our YouTube page. And we have a special playlist made just for today. So it's called the Spring 2023 Ed Collab Gathering. Some of you are watching from there. So if you'd like to see a session, just go to that playlist. And we've curated all of the sessions across the day. S is for session, W is for workshop. So each of those sessions, 1, 2, 3, and 4, will open up across the day following our agenda. So if you want to check the times, you can go to our main page for the agenda list there. But so those are the many different ways that you can watch. If you're on the go, you can even just listen to the audio from YouTube if you'd like. One thing to know is if you're on any of the pages, whether it's on YouTube or on our website, if it's, let's say, 11 o'clock when the next session starts, 11 a.m. Eastern, and things aren't playing, there's two things to try. One is just hit play or try refreshing your page. Our mantra has always been refresh. If things aren't working, just refresh. We're likely on it. Because we're a virtual conference, we can't send out information to all of you, because some of you are literally in your pajamas right now, and we welcome that. It's PD in your PJs. The way that we will let you know any announcements, including if there's any issues with our streams or anything that's going on, is through our Twitter channel at the Ed Collab. So you can go to Twitter, go at the Ed Collab, and there we'll post any announcements. If there's any issues that you should be aware of, or let's say video's not working, we'll let you know that there too. In the event that there are any issues today, we have a full tech team behind the scenes, all volunteers working hard to make sure the day works. So if a session's not running the way it should, literally give it 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, we will make sure that it's up. The other great thing about today is it's all recorded. So all of the sessions will then be recorded on our event website, gathering.theeducatorcollaborative.com, and also on our YouTube page. So if you miss something, or if there's 5 different websites you want to see all at the same time, or 5 different sessions you want to see all at the same time, you can always come back and watch them later. In fact, we encourage you to. One thing we're going to ask of you, and we always ask of you, and we're going to say pretty please do this. What we love about the gathering is that it's always been accessible to everyone everywhere, and we always have thousands of viewers from around the world. So we love that there's access. What we miss is being able to then, like in the hallway between sessions, say hi to you, or for you to be able to applaud in person for the presenter because you just appreciate so much of what they've shared. So one thing that we're going to ask of you, again, is to please on social media, tag your presenters, use the hashtag the Ed Collab Gathering, make sure you include the at the start. You can tag us as well at the Ed Collab. But by tagging your presenters, it's the way that you would have applauded in person, or you would have asked them questions, you would have followed up. It's a way that you can share your appreciation, your joy, your thanks, your questions with them in real time. So on every one of our presenter pages, right below their video, you'll see their bio. So for example, Dr. Lois, if you're watching her session and you're so inspired by it, and it's truly terrific, all the sessions today are wildly incredible. You can scroll to their bio, and there you'll find, anytime we had it, we'd post Twitter and Instagram information. So you can please let them know how much you appreciate them. If you can't find their bios or find their handles, you can always just tag us at the Ed Collab, and we'll make sure that they see your message. So the Ed Collab Gathering has always been totally free, no registration. So what we ask you to do, and we've done this 19 times now since the beginning, is to think about the joy that you feel during today and to pay that joy forward to a charity. So every Ed Collab Gathering, we ask our keynotes to adopt a charity for us, and they're kept on that session's charity page. So if you go gathering.theeducatorcollaborative.com/charity, that should take you right to our adopted charities page. So think about what perhaps you would have paid for a cup of coffee in between sessions, or maybe at a big conference like today is, you might go out to lunch at some point with some colleagues. So what would you pay for lunch? Or even what would you pay for registration for a day like this? And instead of paying it to the Ed Collab, we ask that you take those moments of inspiration that you feel, and there's many ways to put those into action. And one that we're going to ask of you is that you go to our charity page and you donate towards one of our adopted charities for the day. Instead of paying for coffee or lunch or registration, take what you would have paid and pay that joy forward. We always like to say as well, paying a monetary something forward isn't the only way to share your joy from today. Consider that there are many ways to give charitably, including of your time and expertise. So we're offering 2 charities that we've adopted for today, Asha for Education and the Transgender Law Center. Both of those are the charities that our keynotes have adopted for us, and we're sharing with you. However, you could donate anywhere you'd like, including of your time, your energy, and your expertise too. You can learn more about both of these charities on the charity page. Also, we just saw this morning that the Transgender Law Center's website of all days seems to be down right now. So we're hoping across the day it comes back up. But if you try to donate there and you can't even access the site, we can't access it either. Hopefully when it opens again, you can check later today. It does exist. We have been on it. There just seems to be that they're having some issues just this morning. If you're watching this recording, it's probably fixed. But if you're live with us right now, just be aware of that. So a few places that you can find the charities on that website, /charity. Also on the top of our page, if you go to the adopted charities link, you go right to the charity page itself. And then there also are images on the sidebar. You can click on those too. So the EdCollab gathering is hosted by the EdCollab. I'm the founding director. And we provide K-12, pre-K through 12, literacy professional development and speaking and consulting and support with curricula. So you can learn more about us and my amazing colleagues on our website. So one important announcement. One part of the EdCollab family is our associates. So our associates are a 2-year cohort. It's 2 full years where you are a part of the Educator Collaborative think tank, and you meet online with us about once a month across the school year. And then there's sometimes some other study groups that open up kind of tangentially as well too. I have to say this is now we'll be going into our 3rd cohort starting in 2023. The associates every single year are just the most incredible education professionals that bring so much energy, joy, incredible learning to our community. And so the current cohort year is about to end. It ends on July 31st, and the brand new cohort starts on August 1st. So I'm happy to announce that we are soon going to open up applications for our 2023-2025 associate cohort. You'll be able to learn more about that on our website. It is any role in education as long as your focus is around literacy. So we have classroom teachers, instructional coaches, administrators, college level instructors and professors. We have library media specialists. We have all sorts of folks that all work around and think deeply about literacy education. If you're someone that is seeking community, you want to be with other like-minded folks who believe in literacy, justice, anti-racism, building community, and continual learning, then this is a completely free opportunity for you. It's totally free. The applications, I will say, every year are always of the incredibly highest caliber. So please do put your all into answering the questions on our application, because we do review those carefully. But it's a way that you can stay connected to a community that we strive really hard and just continue to grow in across the year, that it's a place where we learn together, but it's also a place where we support one another too. So please do consider applying. Follow us on all of our social media or check back on our website. May 1st, those applications will open, and they'll be open for just 1 month. They'll then close on June 1st. So look forward to that. Coming up shortly are our keynotes. We have both Padma and Shauna who will will open and close today. But before we start, I just wanted to share a few thoughts to get us going for today, and then I'll introduce our incredible keynote speaker for this morning. So things are horrible right now in the world. Jessica, Padma, and I, just before I jumped in today, we were just talking, and there are many, many things that make what's happening in our country, in our world, and in our schools feel terrifying and terrible. I'm going to choose this morning to not spend my time on those folks. Instead, what I'd like to do this morning in this season of rejuvenation and growth, this springtime that we're in, I would like to preach to the choir for just a moment. I heard once there was someone had said, it's okay sometimes to preach to the choir because a choir needs practice too. I work with many, many educators at the EdCollab and across the country, and so many of us are feeling completely drained and exhausted and tired and feeling like what's happening right now politically, what are we doing? Where are we? Do our voices even matter? And so I want to talk directly to you this morning. There's plenty of time to talk to the people who need other messages. I want to talk to you. Take a time machine with me for a moment. Let's go back in time. Let's land in maybe the 80s, 90s, maybe even early 2000s, but let's say we're like 80s, 90s. I'd like you for a moment to think if you were a teacher in that time period, or if you were a student in that time period, 80s, 90s, maybe early 2000s. What were the stories that you heard in school What did you see on TV? What books were available to you? What movies did you watch? If I think back to those time periods, 80s, 90s, much of what was on television and movies was stereotypes of people. If I think about Asian representation in media, if there was any, sometimes it was literally played by white people doing racist stereotypes. If I think about the kinds of Black stories that were told in school, a lot of it was around a very particular civil rights era. And a lot of those stories were about justice, but also about pain. If I think about queer people existing at all in anywhere, if I think about the ways that terms were used in school amongst children as attacks, not as support or love. If I think about how people were treated, Ellen DeGeneres, Rosie O'Donnell, who broke incredible barriers in queer representation on television, also lost their popular television shows because of coming out. If I think back to that time period, and if you're in that time period with me, where we are today, we have a long, long way to go, but please don't lose sight of how far we've been coming. The stories that are told today, the ways that books exist for children, lives exist for children in our schools, the way that we as adults can tune into a wide variety of lived experiences that aren't just about pain, but are about joy and community. Our media landscape, our literature landscape, everything that we're in has grown and changed because of all of you. I'm preaching to the choir here, and I know there's so much hard, and there are so many things that still are not okay, and there's ways where it feels like we're moving backwards, but I think it's important for us to know that a lot of what's happening politically with a strong but small group of misinformed, disconnected people is happening in reaction to the fact that your work to tell true stories to children, to bring books into your classrooms, to have the hard conversations that you've been having for many of you across your entire lives, for some of us across even just the last handful of years, really engaging and thinking about identity and representation. Think about this. In the most recent elections, the generation that's been just becoming voting age over the last several years, the oldest Gen Z are around like 26 right now. This new cadre of voters in what's called Gen Z have been voting with a mission. They've been voting with a vision. They've been voting with a vengeance. And these are young adults and adults who have been in your classrooms over the past several years. In this moment of renewal, before we start our day, I just want to suggest to you that you don't lose all hope. A lot of things feel terrible, but we would not be to where we are now if it wasn't the work that you've done so far. Teaching is stressful. If you're considering another job, I don't blame you. But also, we are so, so lucky to be here today. We are so, so lucky to fight the fight that we're in. We're so, so lucky to be able to look people in the eye and say, why would we get rid of that book? To say, you can give me the policy you want, but I quietly on the side am going to organize. To say, I'm going to keep loving my kids so that all of them know that they matter in my classroom, and I'm going to do it in overt and covert ways because this is the moment that I was born for. So thank you. Thank you for being here today in this moment of renewal where we're connected together with a mission, with a vengeance, and to come even farther than we already have. So it's with great pleasure I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker this morning, Padma Venkatraman. Padma is an multi-award-winning, multi-starred review, multi-honor-winning author of incredible books for young adults. Kids, and Jessica was just saying this morning, some of her book club children chose A Time to Dance as the book that they wanted to read towards this end of the school year. Padma's stories are incredibly, they're stories of incredibly daring children who don't give up the fight, who passionately believe in building a future for themselves and each other. Her writing is beautiful and glorious, and we are so, so lucky to have her here this morning. You can find Padma on her website. You can also follow her on Twitter and on Instagram. Those are her handles right there. Padma has adopted for us this morning Asha for Education. If you go to our charity site, you'll see one thing she says is that she chose Asha for Education because it's a nonprofit that helps educate young people in India. Education is what Vijay, the narrator of The Bridge Home, dreams about, as does Vijay, the protagonist of my debut novel, Climbing the Stairs. So it is an incredible honor. Oh, I should also say that Padma right now is in a hotel because she's just been speaking at, and will continue to speak at the rest of today, the New England Society of Children's Books Writers and Illustrators Conference. Padma is everywhere, and you should bring her to your school and conference as well, too. Without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Padma Venkatraman. Thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you so much. Namaskaram, everyone. I'm going to try to share my slides. And I notice we're starting at 10:07. I have to be done by 10:45. So I'm going to go through them fairly quickly, my visuals. But if you want later on to see them, you can definitely go into my website. And you have to spell my name correctly, but it's just padmavenkatraman.com. You just have to make sure you pay attention to that, and you will see it. Or if that's a little hard, you can take a photograph of this slide, and you'll see that there's that little scannable link. So if you scan that, you can get directly to my website. There's also that bit.ly code, or whatever it's called, the bit.ly link that it has. So those are also two other ways to get to my website. If you get to my website, you will of course find a lot of information and discussion guides and all of that related to my books. But diversity is something that has been so important to me, right? Equity, inclusion, and it's something I've been working on in different fields for a very long time. So you will also find links to other people's books, because I love lifting up other authors, other voices. I always have done that since way before diversity became a catchphrase as it is today, which is so great that it is. And it's so great we're actually at a point that we're, in a way, celebrating it in spite of all the backlash that we're getting. So I think you'll find that. You'll also find a whole lot of general diversity resources as well. So please do visit my website. And the best way to keep in touch with me is to sign up for my newsletter, which doesn't come too often, but has links, both information on my own books, but also other things that I have found interesting and wonderful, like this incredible community that you have created with the Ed Collab. Jessica and Chris and everyone else, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm going to start you off with a little writing prompt. Now, I would like you all to close your eyes and take yourselves back to a time in your lives when you were really, really happy. Think about that for a second. Can you hear what someone is saying? Can you see what is going on in your head? Maybe there's a scent, or if some beautiful fragrance or some taste that is associated with this moment, or maybe not. I don't know. But think about that. And that can be a writing prompt for your kids. If you're doing writing with your kids, if any of you here are educators who are doing ELA stuff, just taking them back into a happy moment can be such a great way to start something off, whether it's a poem or a story or whatever else it is. And in that moment, one thing that you might want them to do is not just to say, I was happy, but push them to bring out the details of all 5 senses that are in that moment. That is what we do as writers to, evoke an emotion such as joy. It's not enough to just say we're happy. It's so important to really bring in the specifics, the details, and through those specifics and details, we become able to communicate with that universal in us. Now, one of the happiest moments of my life was when I was a kid, and I got this gift, and I was actually initially very upset because me and another cousin of mine who were really, very close in age, We got the same kind of size of a gift usually whenever we got it, with similar gifts because we were so close in age. But once an aunt came over and she gave me a teeny tiny package, and my cousin had this humongous package, and she ripped it open, and it was this board game. It was all shiny and colorful because in those days we played board games. And I opened my package, and it was a book. It was not even a book that had colored pictures. It was a book with black and white pictures. And I was, without even black and white pictures, right? We had no pictures. It just had text. And I was devastated. I thought, oh my God, my aunt doesn't just dislike me, she hates me. And then because I was so close to tears, I ran out, and I knew, my cousins would have, I don't know, teased me if I cried, which now I'm an adult woman. If I cry, I'd be like, that's okay. I showed my emotion. As a kid, that wasn't an option for me. I wasn't that strong. So I ran off and I opened the book. And halfway down that first page, I had movies in my head that were better than any movie I had ever seen. I had pictures in my head, which, with all due respect to illustrators and visual artists, were much better than anything I'd ever seen because they were mine, right? And that is the gift that a book can give you. For me, a book is so many things. It's like a room. You open the book and you open a door and you enter into a room. You enter into maybe a different place, a different time. But most important, you enter for a brief moment into someone else's life, into their head, into their heart, and you have this bit of soul merging, right? And that doesn't mean that you necessarily have to agree with everything that the protagonist thinks or does. But just by being in that protagonist's head, in their body in a way, right? If they're scared, your heart beats faster, right? In a scary moment in the book. If they are upset, you are crying. That is empathy. That is compassion. And to me, more than anything else, a book is a package of compassion. Now, that day when I discovered this incredible thing, I left and I was being driven back in a car, and I went past a rubbish dump that looked, this is the nicest rubbish dump I could find in India. And I saw a child with bare hands and bare feet going through it, probably to find something to eat. And I realized that child would probably never discover the magic that I had discovered, probably never even hold a book in their hands. And that stayed with me, and it came a little bit closer to me than I expected, because my parents separated when I was around 8 years old. And then suddenly my family being me and my mother at the time, went from this huge house to this teeny tiny apartment. So you can see the big house on the top, and you see this awful apartment in the picture below. And I ended up being in a place with, suddenly very, very small location in terms of space, and also being bullied by adults and kids, because in India at the time, it was very unusual, it still is pretty unusual, to have parents who are alive but not living together. So I got bullied a lot. However, what did also happen was that my mom, who had been a wealthy woman and was able to donate money to charities, found she couldn't do that, but she made time somehow to teach and to volunteer and help out at shelters for homeless kids, and where kids who weren't socioeconomically privileged were taught. And in fact, kids who were going through even more financially than my mother and I were going through at the time. Because my mother did have an education. So when she got kicked out, she was able to sort of restart, even though it was very difficult for her, and stand on her own 2 feet. Some of these kids that I knew were going through dire poverty. And because of that dire poverty that they were experiencing, they really were not interested in bullying me. And some of them became my good friends. And decades later, I felt as though I could hear the voice. This is how my books always start, with a voice. And then, that sort of develops. But I felt like I could hear the voice of a sister speaking to another sister. And I knew these two girls loved each other so much. And I could not tell why the two girls were apart, because that was very clear to me. They weren't together anymore. And I really felt like I had to follow that voice to find out what was going on. And I did. And I saw the girls run away from their home to escape domestic violence. I saw that their father was violent and abusive towards their mom. And it was a very difficult thing for me to write about, because I had experienced abuse when I was young, and I never spoke about it to anyone. I certainly did not even feel like I could put that on my mother, because she was already going through such a hard time. It was very, very difficult for me, because I had to still meet my father once a week after they separated, and didn't tell anyone about this. But I really, and I think in a sense in my head, I really wanted to escape. And in the book, that's what happens. The two girls run away. They board a bus like the one you see in the picture, and they go from their village to an Indian city. And unlike the guy that you see in this picture, or the cow that you see in the other picture, or just sort of standing bravely in the Indian streets, which happens all the time, these kids are from a village. They're sort of blown away by all the noise and all of that. And they're struggling just to do basic things in the city. But luckily for them, they end up on a bridge, on a ruined bridge. And if any of you are from India, from Chennai, Madras, you will see this bridge, which is across the Adyar River, which was the actual bridge that inspired my novel, The Bridge Home. And I would see kids on this bridge sometimes, like the kids in my book. The two girls end up meeting these two fantastic boys who become their very good friends. And they form a little family. They adopt a stray dog, like this one that you see in this picture. And things are in a way wonderful, because the girls are now in this environment that they've created for themselves, which is a loving family. However, one of the sisters, who was really instrumental in moving away, wanted so much to go to school, because unlike all of us who probably complained at some time about going to school is a privilege that, sometimes we take for granted, right? And these kids really wanted, or at least the one girl really, really wanted to do that in the hope of bettering herself, which is why one of the reasons they came to the city, in addition to escaping their dad. But her dreams of going to school are getting distant, because this is what the kids are forced to do day after day, every day. Go through mountains of rubbish, like the one that you see in these pictures. And if you look closely, you'll see that there are people with backpacks on these rubbish dumps, trying to go through the rubbish dumps to find something to salvage and sell. And this is what the kids have to do. And obviously that means they have no time for school, right? And these are pictures that I took pre-pandemic in Chennai, in Madras city. And the kids end up scavenging what they can, and they sell this recyclable material that they can find, right, to a guy who separates them, who owns what he calls a waste mart, like the ones that you see in the picture. And they manage to build a shelter and eke out a living for a little while. But then something horrible happens. They are driven away from even this tiny home that they've created on a bridge by men who want to enslave them, which is something that still unfortunately happens in so many parts of the world today. People are indeed enslaved, right, everywhere, even if it's illegal. And so to escape that, they run away, and they end up hiding under a banyan tree, like the one that you see in the picture above, in a graveyard. And now I want you all to vote for a second and think about this. Do you think I believe in ghosts? No. Or do you think I believe in yes? Ghosts, yes. And you can raise your hands. I can't see them, or you can if you think that that I believe in ghosts. And I tell you what, if you said yes, I believe in ghosts, you're completely correct. If you said no, I don't believe in ghosts, you're also equally correct, because I am a scientist. My brain is all very scientific. But if you stuck me in a graveyard alone at night, I guarantee my feet would totally believe in ghosts and would have me running out of that graveyard as fast as I could possibly go, because I don't want to be in a graveyard all alone in the middle of the night, no matter what my head thinks. And yet one of the friends that I met in one of those homeless shelters as a kid was forced to live in a graveyard day after day because she was seeking to run away and have a safe space from men who wanted to enslave her. And that was where she felt safe. And because she was someone who knew me so well and knew that in secret, I was always scribbling stories. I always wanted to be an author. She said to me, Padma, will you write my story someday? And I said to her, I promise you, I will do that. And my long overdue promise is my novel, The Bridge Home, which is my fourth novel, and it is not even my first. So it took a long, long time for that novel to come up out of this space of that promise that I really wanted to give my friend. And I'm so very grateful for all the awards that this book has won, as indeed I am for all the awards that all of my books have won. I mean, they make me so, so grateful. But the most important thing, I think, for me is the fact that these books are able to help kids today. And I think the only reason that I'm able to write these books are because I listened. And so I think about this a lot, wherever we are. And I know that we're from all over the world, but I'm assuming that many people face these challenges everywhere, right? And listening is such an important point. So when we are in these situations that we're getting somebody who is challenging us or challenging something that we've written, it is hard. But if it's a face-to-face interaction, I encourage you to see if there's a way that you can begin by listening and finding common ground, even if it is very scant, and then trying to see if they can begin to understand what compassion is. And we can try to begin that process by being compassionate ourselves. For one thing, most people are wanting their children to be safe, whatever they may think. We may not agree on what that safety might be. We may not agree on how to raise a child, but at least we can come together saying, yes, in a way, we do want the best for our kids, and see if that can be a starting point for conversations. Listening and then having them listen to you because you have listened to them for a while. And to get them to that point, like I said, the greatest reward for me is always when a child says to me that they are going to change something. If this might be, some children have been in very unsafe places, some adults have been in unsafe places, and after reading my books or hearing me speak, have been able to have that little extra push to take themselves into a place of safety, either by opening up to me and then I connect them with someone, or by opening up to someone in their community. And I think that is something that is so incredibly important, right? So books can and do save lives. And if we can help people see what lives we start to put at risk if we don't include a diversity of books, if we don't include and value different voices, that is something that is so incredibly important, right? Respecting difference, not erasing. And I had an article that I wrote a long time ago, you will find this on my website, which said, accept, don't tolerate. But now at the state of the world, sometimes I just say, at least tolerate. If you cannot accept, at least tolerate, because coexistence is such a very low bar. But if we can at least begin there, at least if we can begin with coexistence and toleration and the understanding that, yes, you may have the right to restrict what your own child does or does not do or read or so on, whether that's good or bad for your child is a different matter. While we still do have that right as parents and adults, we do not have the right to dictate or to disturb what someone else's child can have access to, what someone else's child has a right to be able to read. So I think that's something that is just so incredible, right? And if you're wondering how my journey began a long time ago in India. I am not one of the South Asian authors who like grew up in the States. I moved away from India when I was 19. So it's kind of cool that we're celebrating the 19th anniversary of the EdCollab or the EdCollab's gatherings. I left when I was 19 and I always wanted to be a writer. But guess what I did? I studied oceanography. And the reason that I ended up studying oceanography was because I was growing up as a young girl in India, and the expectations laid upon me by society at that time were very stringent, very different. I was expected to, sure, maybe study, but then marry someone that was chosen and approved of by my family and end up in a life that was dictated by that person. And I knew that that was not going to be my life. That is not what I wanted to do. And I felt very strongly that I wanted to be independent, and that meant financial independence. So I moved halfway across the world to a part of the world where there were no iPhones, no you phones, no me phones, no nobody phones. And I could only talk to my mom at that point for maybe 3 minutes once a week if I was lucky, or 3 minutes once a month sometimes, because that's about amount of money that I had. And I ended up staying in the lab, being on board research vessels, having incredible experiences at the College of William and Mary and other places. I, explored rainforest. That's me in a pink t-shirt exploring the rainforest, for instance, and so on and so forth. And I did all of that. And in spite of the fact that I had such a phenomenal education, I also experienced very quickly when I came to this country a lot of racism and both what we call micro and macro aggressions. Although these days, I think I really want to get away from using those terms, because I think what we sometimes call a microaggression may be something larger. And I don't think we need to minimize something by saying it's micro. So I think I'm really rethinking those terms for myself and questioning why we use those terms, because I think there's so much that happens cumulatively, and it happened. So I started to understand both how I was seen in this country as a person with very dark skin, and also become aware of my own privileges, because we all have situations in which we are privileged. And I certainly, as a cisgendered female, had my own privilege in that sphere. And so I was, very conscious of that, started to think of these issues a long time ago, and then went from being the only BIPOC female in my incoming oceanography class to being the only person of color, the only female, and the chief scientist on research vessels in the Baltic. And that was the time at which I really started to feel like, although I was doing so much science, I was working on climate change, which is one of the most important, incredible, horrifying threats that we face to our existence as a species on this planet, and that we are continuing even this day to doubt and deny ridiculously. And when I was a graduate student, it was already happening. I was working on pollution. We knew so many things were going to happen. It was like hitting my head against a wall. And I started to feel, how are we going to change some of these things? And I thought, well, I think one of the ways to change them is surely to create excellent facts, which is what a scientist does. But another way to change them is to change our feelings, not to tell someone else what to think, but to encourage them to be more empathetic, to encourage people to be more compassionate. And I felt like that is what a story can do. And so that's what I started to do. And I encourage you, again, to read from, there's so many experts, right? All over the world. Here are some that I've listed. And again, you can get all of this on my website. But there are incredible people. Listen to them and read and learn from them. It doesn't mean you agree with everything everybody says, but it just expands your mind to be exposed to them. But also remember this, right? There's no such thing as an expert. Yes, there is such a thing as an expert, but also there's no such thing as an expert. Ultimately, you have to decide what is right for you. And you are always learning. You are always unlearning. I am always learning and unlearning. We are always having to educate ourselves. and to keep going. And sometimes what happens is that we start to be afraid, and we're afraid to say the wrong thing or to hurt someone's feelings. And so we don't say anything at all. And that's something that I really discourage. Don't allow fear of writing or reading or teaching or speaking keep you from doing what you feel is right. Courage is such an important thing. And here's a quote from my latest novel, which says, "Fear is a lock, courage is a key." And the reason that I say that is because I think it is true. And I think when we have fear in ourselves, we start to cage ourselves in. And that's something that we need to stop. We need to be able to pick up that key of courage and let ourselves out of this cage of fear that we sometimes put ourselves in. And I think all of you educators out there listening today, all over the world, you are embodying courage and bravery. You are helping young people do one of the most important things in the world, right? Which is to differentiate between fact and opinion. If nothing else, if you're able to help them learn to sift truth from lies wherever you are in the world, I think that is one of the most important things that you as educators can do for them, right? I see that we're at 10:32, so I'm going to go quickly to tell you a little bit about my next novel, or not next novel, my latest novel, Born Behind Bars. I'll flash a few diversity resources for you, and then stop and see if we can take a couple of questions if we have the time, or else just please feel free to reach out to me. So one of the things that I also think is very important is we talk a lot about prejudice based on appearance, which happens, right? Skin color is a big deal, unfortunately, and that's something that causes a lot of prejudice and bias. However, something else that continues to cause prejudice is accent. When I open my mouth and start to speak in this country, it's very clear that I did not grow up here. And so sometimes we exclude each other from conversations because of that. Sometimes I felt excluded in South Asian gatherings because I am not from here. Another thing that happens, which we never acknowledge, which tends generally in most societies to affect females more, is appearance and also gray hair and other signs of aging. And for some reason, ageism also is something that continues to be expressed in many, many different ways. And so I'm very thrilled when my gray-haired self is invited to speak at places like this, but also let's be aware of that. Let's acknowledge that it happens, and let's think about that, right? Here's another little writing prompt for you before I go into Born Behind Bars, which I would like you to think of. If you're sitting where there's a window, or if you're not, then pretend there's a window, just turn and look out of that window for a minute or two. What do you see or hear? What do you feel when you look out of this window? And here's something that I want you to think of when you look back at the screen, is how you are feeling and how that affects what we see. And that's the interrelationship between the outer and the inner is something that is always going to make for good writing. So while we can describe something, a scene from the outside, if we're able to imbue that scene with also what the character, what the narrator is feeling, then that becomes usually an excellent piece of writing. So with Born Behind Bars, the story is based on a true story of a boy who was born in jail in India, right? And I didn't know this until I came across a BBC article, but there are thousands of poor low-caste women who are jailed in India, which means they are locked up and never given their day in court. People, I should say, not just women. And jail is a place which I never knew for a long time. Jail is the place that you go, and then this is an inherent bias in many societies. If you're able to pay money called bail, then you can stay out of jail, which is already very unequal. But if you cannot afford to pay that, you get locked up. Then you are still supposed to get a lawyer. You're supposed to get your day in court. And then if you are found guilty, then you go to prison to serve out your sentence. Well, This woman and plenty of other people in India get locked up in jail, and then they're called under trials, which means they're waiting for their day in court. Sometimes they never get it and end up spending more time in jail behind bars than if they were found guilty and convicted of the crime of which they're accused. And this woman had a little boy, who was born in jail and who ended up spending most of his childhood in jail. He stayed there till he was 9 years old. And when I heard this kid became a character in my mind. And as always, my first thing was to, hear the voice and then to start seeing this movie. And then finally, it feels like there's this ghost, haunting my house. And then this ghost sort of possessing me to the point that I am actually seeing the scenes from within the character. That's when I know that the character is literally under my skin. I started to see at first this boy sitting in a dirty, dingy jail cell. And if you read that first page of Born Behind Bars, all it is this kid who is sitting, looking up through a tiny window, a barred window in the jail, and looking at the clouds and seeing how the clouds are able to stretch out in a world which has no walls, but in his world, everything is walled, right? And yet he is singing. His voice is literally escaping and reaching beyond those bars, because they can lock up your body, but they cannot lock up a person's courage. They cannot lock up a person's creativity, and they cannot, most of all, lock up a person's compassion. And so Kabir, this little boy who is half Muslim and half Hindu, because it's very important for me to also have religious diversity in my books, also including those who are not religious, which the Bridge Home has a narrator who isn't subscribing to any particular religion either. So that, I think, is an important part of my work and has been a feature of my work all along. So here's this kid longing, obviously desperately, to be free, and then his wish, close to the beginning of the novel, almost comes true. The warden of the jail sets him free, but his mother remains behind bars. So suddenly this kid who has never been in the outside world ends up homeless and hungry in a city in the outside world. And in fact, the city of Chennai, where I grew up. And luckily for him, after some pretty harrowing experiences, a girl from the Roma community, who is indeed like my friend, one of my very close friends from these homeless shelters, takes him under her wing. And she has a parrot, which she uses to tell people's fortunes, which is something that happens in India. And she says, hey, you know what? You can earn a living by singing and earning money for food that way. And he starts to do that, and he's able to survive on the streets. And, he learns to enjoy small freedoms. Even eating something of his choice is not something that he's done before, because he doesn't even know how to order off a menu. He hasn't had choice, right? He's always got the same thing at whatever time they give it to him in jail, sometimes garnished with flies. But what he wants to do is not just survive on the streets. He wants to free his mother. And so, although the girl tells him, we're low caste, we're poor, we're kids, there's no way you can free your mother, he's convinced that if he finds his father, who has lost touch with his mom for a long time since they went to jail, his father will help free the mom, because he is firmly convinced that his mom and his dad still love each other. And this is going to be the key to freeing his mom. So he goes off on a journey to try to find his dad based on some clues that he has. And, before I finish up with this part, I just want to say this. I want to say there is a whole lot of humor and laughter in my books, because I think being a survivor of abuse, what kept me surviving was being able to find moments of joy, even in these very difficult times, these very difficult situations. And so I encourage you to also think about that. And with your kids, teach them what good laughter is, right? Not cruel laughter, not mean bullying laughter, but the difference between that and joyous laughter, right? Joie de vivre is such something that is just very, very important. It kept me alive and is a very important feature of my books, because through all of these, the kids that I knew laughed through my very horrible childhood that I wouldn't want foisted on anyone. I kept open that ability to laugh. And I think that's something that's very important for all of my books. And I'm so thankful for, all the awards and, starred reviews and everything else that my books have received. But, one of the things that really worries me about a book like Born Behind Bars is that sometimes people will come up with this idea. They'll say, hey, incarceration. Oh, well, my kids don't deal with anyone who's incarcerated. My kids can't relate to this book. And I think it's so important for us to really question why we say this sort of thing about some books, but not about other books. Because when we have books about kids who fly on brooms or fly on dragons or have, pet dragons that they're raising, we never say that doesn't happen to our kids. We assume that our kids can relate. For years and years and years, we've had, white, straight male protagonists shoved down our throats. And some are great books. However, their point of view, we're always expected to relate to wherever we are in the world, because I grew up in India and I still had, as a child, access to basically books that had white male protagonists, straight protagonists. And I think it's so important for us to say, hey, is there a way that we can, diffuse our tension with a little bit of humor, like saying, hey, you know what, your kids don't fly on brooms, and yet those books are there, and you never question that relatability of those books. Some places do. So, I know that some of those books also have issues these days, but it's just such an important thing to think about, to see if we can diffuse tension with humor, to see if we can educate and provide facts that hopefully people cannot argue with. In this country, for instance, innocent Black people in this country, being the states where I am speaking from right now, Black people are 50% more likely to be incarcerated for murder, 19 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted of drug crimes. So we're talking about innocent people, and that is clearly racist, right? So if we can speak about all of these things, and sometimes fall back on procedure, but as Chris said earlier, loud voices are intimidating, and we hear them and we react to them. They're often not well informed, and we don't need to privilege them. Be careful that we don't give them too much time. And sometimes what can happen is that if you have a book that is not based directly in the society that you live in this case, if you have a book like Born Behind Bars, it can open up conversations about miscarriage of justice in this country in an indirect way. And so I think that is something that is important for us. And when we contextualize books like this, it's also important to do so without condescension, without othering the culture that we're looking at, and being really open to delving and diving into parallels that a book set in an international climate might have with our own climate, our own society, our own nation, right? Not pointing fingers out, but remembering, as I say often, that if you're, pointing a forefinger at someone, there are usually at least 3 fingers pointing back at you. And I think that's something that's very, very important for me. Here are some other incredible, digital resources that there are. And, very quickly to briefly give you a bit of an introduction into my next 2 books. And I'm sorry again that the slides are not showing up as well as I would have liked. We tried a lot of different ways. We did have some tech challenges. So that's why. But to think about that, one of the first South Asian novels in verse ever, I was told, was A Time to Dance, which is an incredible honor to know that it broke that glass ceiling. And it's a book that is about a girl who loves to dance more than anything else in the entire world, and loses her lower limb and then continues to dance. But it's not just about physical recovery. It is also about compassion to oneself and spiritual discovery. And so I want to just say, to take a moment to also think about compassion to ourselves, giving ourselves space, giving ourselves grace, giving ourselves time for self-care is vital and is so important, especially as educators who are on the front lines of so many battles taking the time you need to give it to yourself is incredible and is important. And I hope you never, never forget that. Religious diversity, as I said earlier, is something that's important to me. Here are a few books that are not mine. Like I said, I love to raise those up. I think that's important. And disability is something else that's very important to me, disability representation, because I have an invisible disability. And if you don't know what intersectionality is, which I'm sure most of you do know, but it's just, the intersections between two minoritized groups, two marginalized or underrepresented or whatever groups. And so if I self-identify with more than one, then I'm intersectional. And I think that's something to also think about. So, are there books that may represent intersectionality, and can you bring those in? And also, encouraging children in your settings, whether they're libraries or classrooms, to feel free to be able to self-identify, but also not to put them ever on the spot because of their identity or assumptions that you make about their identity. I think is just so important. Here are a couple of disability resources, again, that I'm going to flash on the screen. Ageism, I spoke about in terms of authors, but also fighting ageism in terms of books. We tend to be very excited about a new book when it comes out, or a book that gets a shiny sticker on it, right? And forget the ones that don't. But I think, again, much as I love all the shiny stickers that my books bear, it's so important for you to choose books that you love. And if you love it, and if you think it deserves a shiny sticker, then treat it as if it won one. And continue to keep alive books that you love, even as you question books that are old and are just sitting around because other people said they were good. And so, when we talk about rethinking the classics, we are shouted at and told this and that and the other. I still get hate mail because of articles that I wrote many, many years ago, one of them over a decade ago, which just said, let's rethink classics and the place that we put them in. Because often classics privilege a certain point of view. I'm going to take a minute to just speak about The Secret Garden, which is a book that so many people love and that I read over and over again because it was a horrifying book for me, both from the disability and from the point of view of gender. I had this female protagonist that was very exciting, and yet this was a racist female protagonist who refers to people like me and calls me a name that I really, was very derogatory, although I think later versions don't have that particular word in them. It's still horrifying. She says, I'm not one of those, meaning one of me. And Mary, who is the protagonist or the main character in The Secret Garden, is the character I'm supposed to identify with when she comes out with blatantly racist statements. And then equally as bad, Colin, another character in this book, is maybe somebody who's disabled, maybe somebody who's not disabled. We're really never sure. And then when he is cured magically and then walks out of the wheelchair, his dad embraces him. And then you're supposed to think everything is fine and dandy because the dad who has rejected this child when this child was disabled, sort of, is suddenly loving this child when this child has been miraculously cured. There's so many problems with books like that. And yet we continue to keep thinking that they're great. So all I want to say is keep old books on your shelves. Don't kick them out or forget about them just because they're old, but also some of the really old books that we hold up as classics, rethink the place and the time that you give to them. And if you do include them, please make sure they're discussed, and please make sure you're giving equal airtime and space time on your bookshelves to other books as well. Diversity is such an important thing to think of, even within categories. So also please think about that. The Walter Dean Myers Award. There are other awards as well. I wrote an article in the School Library Journal about so many awards that uplift diversity within categories. So always be sure of that. I do want to put up this other resource, which is called Diverse Verse. That is something that I founded, which looks at diversity in poetry. So if you just do www.diverseverse.com or diverseverse.com, you'll find a whole lot of articles, writing prompts, tremendous resources that seek to amplify and uplift not just verse novels, but also poetry of different kinds written by people of color and LGBTQ authors and so on. So please check that resource out. We've just done a series of blog posts on the topic. And I don't want to dwell on this, but just also to say to all of you, respect copyright, verbal and written. Always quote somebody if you can. Don't buy and resell books. That's something that's really important if you support art. So please be aware of that. Never buy pirated copies and so on. Educate yourselves about that if you don't already know. I think that is something that's really, really important, because I think artists make even less actually than teachers, which is a sad thing to say. And also, I know that it's a hard time for everyone, but perseverance is something that I would like to leave you with as the last thing that I speak about. My novel, Climbing the Stairs, was rejected 30 times before it finally was taken in, even though it's about India in the 1940s. It's about forgotten BIPOC heroes, which is something that is such a vital topic. And it has an incredible family tie-in, because my granduncle was part of the Allied force in the Second World War. And my mom was someone who was witnessing all of that time, and that very crazy time in India, which was both the nonviolent Gandhian freedom movement that was going on, as well as this very violent war that was going on. And so I fought some very basic gender battles, like the protagonist of the climbing the stairs. And my mom, who you see in that picture, literally climbed stairs in a house where she was forbidden to go from downstairs to upstairs, just because she was female and books were supposed to be for men. And if she hadn't done that, I might not have been here today. So with that, I'd like to just say thank you so much. Namaskaram. There again is the bit.ly link if you want to photograph it and access the resources on my website. Thank you so very much for being here today. Please stay in touch. Please reach out. And if there's any way that I can help or be of service to you, I will. Thanks.
Thank you, Padma, so very much. What an inspiring morning, a great way to get things started. All done while you're on the road. We just appreciate you so much and your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you were as inspired as I'm seeing on Twitter, a lot of you are inspired. If you're as inspired as I am this morning, lots of ways that you can stay connected with Padma. You can follow her on Twitter, on Instagram. You can find her at her website, where there's lots of links to resources, to all of her books, and ways that you can stay in touch with her. If you were inspired today and across the day, anytime you feel that moment of, oh, I can breathe, or inspiration, or what a great strategy, whenever you feel that engagement, that we like to call it edu joy, please do consider paying that joy you're feeling forward. Our day is totally free, no registration. We want to give everyone access to watch these incredible sessions, including Padma's inspiring keynote. If you feel energy and engagement and you feel thankful and inspired for tuning in, please do pay the joy forward. We're going to ask you again to pretty please, whether you're watching live or you're watching in the future, please do tag the presenters. There are many great things about being online. We're able to connect and share with folks literally all over the world. However, we miss that personal connection together. And I know all of us as educators, you're constantly presenting to either kids or colleagues or at conferences. Having that feedback really matters. We give a lot in what we do in our role, and you know how great it feels when someone says thank you back to you, or quotes you, or wants to share something that they've learned from you. So please do take a moment to find our presenters' bios. They're on each of their pages. And from there, you can either tweet them directly, or you can send them a message on Instagram, or you can always tag us or use the hashtag #TheEdCollabGathering, and we'd be happy to share those along with you. Coming up next in session 1, we have 3 terrific workshops. They're all so great. Black History Toolbox, titles, tips, and book talk ideas from the EdClub book ambassadors, and being a better assistant coach through reflection and feedback. You can find all of those sessions in 3 ways. One is to navigate on our website, or to go onto the agenda, or if you're following on YouTube, you can go to our YouTube playlist. Our channel is The Ed Collabs. You can find us there. Find the Spring 2023 playlist and look for anything that starts with S1, that's session 1, and you can watch along there. Thank you for all that you do for your colleagues, for your students, and for our amazing profession. Please, please, please pay the joy forward and have a great rest of your gathering.